Hashem, meine Bari, euch alles wieder
Welcome back to the Torah Podcast. I am Michael Brook, and I'd like to drop a bomb, a exciting announcement. We will be, God willing, be featuring new series, I'm not sure how to say that, about midos and how to perfect our character traits, new, even higher level Torah, God willing, in the areas of halacha, Jewish practical law. So, slam that like button, smash that subscribe, and here we go. We will now embark on our weekly Parsha podcast, and we call that the Gishmak of our podcast. What if I told you that I could offer you 30 minutes with the great Reb Chaim Kanievsky, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, perhaps the greatest Torah giant of the last 100 years. What if I told you that you had the opportunity to ask him, what's my job in life? What potential do I have? And what is the fastest route to accessing that potential? How much would you pay for that? Would you pay $100? I reckon that some people would pay $1,000. Perhaps even a couple people might pay $1 million for that. Now, what if I told you that I could offer you something even better? Parshas Behar speaks in a very, perhaps it reveals to us a couple peculiar mitzvos. Mitzvos that don't seem to make a whole lot of sense to us. The mitzvos of Shemitah are such that in the land of Israel, every 7 years, the land must lay fallow. It must lay dormant. It must not be touched. It must not be worked. Every 50 years, the Jubilee cycle hits and all business transactions revert to their original owner. We have mitzvos about how the contract should be written in a way that it should never imply that the sale is forever. It's very interesting. It doesn't make much sense to us. Rabbi Yerucham Levavitch, the great spiritual mean of Yeshivas Mir during the Roaring Twenties, tells us that the Torah is a guidebook. The Torah is a textbook. The Torah is the manual on how to use life. We are the consumer. God is the inventor and the creator. And the Torah is his advice. The way to use the product. No. It is not just advice on the best way to use the product, but rather it is Alexander Graham Bell introducing the only way his phone could be used. It is Steve Jobs, so to speak, showing us how to make a phone call on the iPhone. It is the only way to use the product. The product here being life. The goal, the objective is get as darn close to Hashem as possible or die trying. Lachasos b'noam Hashem ulavaker behechalo. To dwell in God's presence. That's the goal. And how do we get there? What's the best advice? What's the only advice? Well, God tells us. It's mitzvos. It's commandments. It has been suggested with ill intent previously in earlier generations that the mitzvos, the 10 commandments, are not the 10 commandments, but rather they are just the 10 suggestions. Oh, how right they were. Mitzvahs are suggestions. They're suggestions so vital because they are the only way to use the product. The great Evan Ezra, one of the medieval commentators, who has written perhaps one of the greatest commentaries on all of Torah, parallel to Rashi's, writes by the mitzvah of tzitzis. Tzitzis is a commandment that any man wearing a four-cornered garment shall wear tzitzit, these strings on the corners of his jacket. Why, the Torah says, Laman tizkor, so that thou shalt remember my mitzvos. The tzitzis have a total of 613 strings and knots all combined, and that is for us to recall, to constantly remember that God exists and that we have commandments to do. The Evan Ezra suggests that if a man could wear tzitzis for 1 hour a day, We might think that we should be wearing our tzitzis when we are praying, when we say Kriya Shema. After all, what better time to wear tzitzis except for the time that we are wearing them? The Even Ezra says, no, I don't see it that way. I see it that a man should wear tzitzis when he walks in the street, when he gets up in the morning, and when he's on his commute to work. Of course, I'm paraphrasing his words. Tzitzis are for a person to remember that God exists and he shouldn't get distracted. Tzitzis are, for example, the way that a person would tie a string on his finger to remember something. That's what tzitzis is. And just like you would never attempt to teach a man to play piano without having a piano there, and you would never venture to teach someone to ride a bike without having a bike on premises. You cannot do this by textbook, by clarification, by just explaining it. It must be done. We all know that the greatest way to learn is to actually do, hands-on. Doctors and lawyers are taught at the end of law school and medical school. In order to graduate, they must do a certain amount of surgeries. They must argue a certain amount of cases in front of a judge. We must learn through action. That is mitzvos. We are suggesting two things here, no pun intended. Number one, that mitzvos are eitzos. Mitzvos are advice. Mitzvos are suggestions, and mitzvos are the sagely advice from the creator of the world on the best way to use his product that we call life. So study the mitzvos. Ponder the mitzvos. Contemplate the advice that we are given. And above all, do the mitzvos, because that's the best way to take from the advice. If we would have that 30 minutes with Reb Chaim Kanievsky, as we suggested at the beginning, would you throw his advice away or would you take it? If you would take it, then I sure hope that you would take advice from the creator of the world on the best way to use his product that we call life. So when you pick up your Kiddush cup tonight, ponder the advice. Ponder this eitzah. Why do we need to do it with the family in a cup over wine? Think about it. Contemplate it. Conjure up your best idea. Then look in the Rambam. Then look in the Sefer HaChinuch, some of the mitzvos explanation books. Figure it out. But this is what I have to offer you today. I have something better than a meeting with the holy Reb Chaim, who's dwelling up with Hashem. I have practical counsel from the creator of the world. Now, if God gave you advice on the only way to use his world, by doing his mitzvos, would you take God's advice?